The rain was so loud it sounded like the sky itself was tearing apart. Lightning cracked, illuminating the mountainside for just a second, and that's when I saw it. An expensive black car twisted against the guardrail, steam rising from the hood like a wounded beast. My heart stopped. In this poor village we never saw cars like that, not even on sunny days, let alone in the middle of a storm. And yet here it was, broken and half hanging over the edge. I gripped my rusty water bucket tighter. Should I run back? Should I hide? The elders always said, "Don't get involved in the affairs of strangers, they only bring trouble." But then I saw him. The driver's side door swung open, and a man staggered out. Tall, broad-shouldered, his suit clung to him, soaked through. Even from a distance I could feel the sharpness of his aura. He wasn't from here. He didn't belong to our muddy paths and clay huts. And then just as quickly he collapsed into the mud. "Sir!" The word slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. My bare feet splashed through puddles as I rushed forward. The villagers might call me foolish tomorrow, but at that moment all I could think of was that this stranger, who looked like he belonged to another world, was going to die if I didn't help him. When I reached him I gasped. His forehead was bleeding, a deep gash staining the rainwater crimson. His lips were pale, his eyes half closed. "Stay with me," I cried, trying to shake him. His eyelids fluttered. For a second, his dark eyes opened, sharp and cold despite the pain. He looked at me like a wolf sizing up prey, and his hoarse whisper cut through the storm. "Don't touch me." I froze. It wasn't the plea of a man in pain. It was the command of someone used to control. Someone who had never needed anyone's help. But the moment passed, and his head fell against my shoulder. That was when I noticed the weight of him. His body was heavy, his suit drenched. Every step I took felt impossible as I tried to drag him up the muddy slope toward my tiny home. The storm lashed harder, lightning striking close enough to make me flinch, but I kept moving. "Just hold on," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or myself. By the time I pushed open the creaking wooden door of my cottage, my arms felt like they would snap in two. I laid him down on my straw mattress, my chest heaving. Water dripped from his clothes onto the dirt floor. His shoes alone probably cost more than everything in my house combined. As I lit the small oil lamp, I finally saw him clearly. His face was sharp and cold, like it had been carved from stone. Even unconscious, he looked untouchable, as if the world itself wasn't enough for him. "Who are you?" I whispered, brushing the wet hair from his forehead. He didn't answer, but his breathing was ragged, uneven. Panic rose in me. If he died here in my home, I would be blamed. The villagers would say I cursed him, that I lured him in. And yet I couldn't just leave him. So I boiled water, tore one of my old dresses into strips, and cleaned his wound as best as I could. Each time my hand touched his skin I shivered, not from the cold but from something else. This man was powerful, dangerous. I could feel it in the way, even unconscious, he seemed to hold himself. Hours passed. The storm howled outside, but inside it was quiet, except for his labored breaths. At last, his eyes opened again. They locked on mine, sharp as blades. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse but still carried authority. "In my home," I said softly. "You had an accident. You're safe now." His gaze flicked around the room, taking in the cracked walls, the broken chair, the patched blanket covering him. His jaw tightened. "This place." The words dripped with disdain. "Why did you bring me here?" For a moment shame burned through me. My home was nothing, just scraps and shadows. But I lifted my chin. "Because no one else would have," I said firmly. His eyes narrowed, as if no one had ever dared talk back to him. But before he could reply, his strength gave out again, and he fell back against the pillow. I sat there watching him, my heart racing. I didn't know who he was, or what storm his presence would bring into my quiet life. But deep inside a voice whispered, "Nothing will ever be the same again." If this stormy night has already pulled you into their world, imagine how much darker, how much more dangerous, their fates will intertwine. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to follow this journey, because what happens next will leave you breathless. When dawn crept over the mountains, the storm had finally passed, but inside my little cottage, the storm had only just begun. I sat beside him through the night, watching every rise and fall of his chest, terrified it might stop. The oil lamp had burned out hours ago, and the only light now came from the cracks in the wooden walls where the sun pushed its way through. His suit was still damp, his forehead burning with fever. I remembered my grandmother's remedies and hurried outside, gathering bitter herbs that grew by the rocks. My hands shook as I ground them into a paste. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. When I pressed the cloth dipped in herbs against his wound, he stirred. His hand shot up, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't touch me." His voice was low, dangerous, even half-conscious. His eyes opened, sharp as steel, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. I swallowed hard. "If I don't, you'll die." He held my gaze, his pride radiating even in weakness. Then slowly he released me. It was as if lowering his guard, even for a second, was the greatest humiliation. I continued cleaning the wound, wrapping the cloth around his head with trembling fingers. His suit jacket was ruined, soaked in blood and rain. I hesitated, then gently unbuttoned it, replacing it with a patched blanket. His shirt clung to him, expensive fabric torn and stained, but beneath it his body was lean and strong. He was a man used to power, not fragility. When I looked at his hands, I noticed they were rough yet refined, the hands of someone who had signed countless deals, given countless commands. They had never carried buckets of water from the well or chopped wood to keep warm. "You don't belong here," I murmured almost to myself. His lips twitched as if he'd heard me. His eyes opened again, scanning the cracked walls, the dirt floor, the rickety chair. "This shack," he rasped, his tone full of disdain. "Is this where you live?" Heat rose to my cheeks. I should have been ashamed, and maybe part of me was, but another part of me straightened my spine. "Yes, this is my home." He stared at me, disbelief flickering in his eyes, as if he couldn't comprehend how anyone could survive in such a place. For a long moment there was silence. Then, to my surprise, he asked, "Why did you help me?" The question cut deeper than I expected. Why had I? I could have left him there, like the elders would have advised. A stranger, dangerous and powerful, was nothing but trouble. But something about seeing him fall, this man who looked like he had the entire world in his hands, stirred something inside me. "Because you needed it," I whispered. "Because no one else would have." He turned his face away, as if my words unsettled him. His pride bristled, but beneath it I caught something else. A flicker of gratitude? Or maybe curiosity. When I offered him a bowl of porridge, he looked at it as though it were poison. The wooden bowl was chipped, the contents plain, nothing like the meals he was used to. Still, after a long pause, he took it. His hand trembled slightly as he raised the spoon to his lips. I watched his jaw tighten as he swallowed. "It's edible," he muttered finally, and for a second I almost laughed. That moment broke something between us. His coldness thawed just enough for me to glimpse the man behind it. He leaned back against the pillow, his dark eyes studying me in silence. It was unnerving, as though he was peeling away layers I didn't know I had. "You live here alone?" he asked finally. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. No family." The question pierced me, and I looked away. "Not anymore." Something in his gaze softened. Just a little. For once he didn't press further. Instead he said quietly, "You risked yourself. For me." "Why?" His words weren't arrogant this time. They were heavy, carrying something I couldn't name. "I already told you," I whispered. "Because no one else would have." He closed his eyes again, as though my answer disturbed him more than he cared to admit. That day, as the storm clouds lifted outside, the real storm brewed between us. A man who lived in glass towers and dined on gold plates. A girl who lived in mud and survived on scraps. Two worlds that were never meant to touch. And yet, by fate or by cruelty, they had collided under the same broken roof. And deep inside, though I tried to deny it, I knew nothing would ever separate them again. By morning the storm was gone, but the real storm had just begun. The air outside was damp, fresh with the smell of wet earth. Roosters crowed in the distance as I stepped out to fetch more water from the well. I thought the village would be quiet, that no one would notice the man lying inside my house. But I was wrong. Whispers had already begun. I felt the eyes before I heard the voices, sharp, cutting, laced with amusement. Women at the well looked at me with curled lips, hands covering their mouths as they leaned close to each other. Did you hear? She brought a man home last night. A man? In the dead of night. Shameless girl. No wonder no one will marry her. Their laughter rang in my ears, louder than the sound of the bucket hitting the water. My hands trembled as I pulled it up, the rope burning against my palms. I wanted to scream to tell them it wasn't what they thought. But what good would it do? In their eyes, a poor girl like me could never be innocent. By the time I returned, 3 neighbors had already gathered outside my door. Their eyes glittered with curiosity, their voices dripping with venom. I saw her drag him in, soaked to the bone. What kind of woman does that? Maybe she was desperate. Poor thing, living alone. Of course, she'd throw herself at any man she could find. My chest tightened, but I kept walking, clutching the bucket like a shield. Inside I heard him stir. The thought of him overhearing their words made my face burn. I stepped inside quickly, shutting the door against the poisonous whispers. My heart raced as I leaned against the wood, trying to block out the sound. He was sitting up now, leaning on the rough pillow, his dark eyes fixed on me. He had heard. I knew it. For a moment I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. To him, I must have looked pathetic. A poor village girl mocked by her own people. They think I couldn't even finish the sentence. My throat closed. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze lingered on me, unreadable. Then slowly he asked, "Do you care what they think?" His question startled me. I gripped the bucket tighter, water sloshing over the edge. "Of course I care," I whispered. "Their words follow me everywhere. No matter what I do, it's never enough. And now they think I've brought a stranger into my bed." The shame pressed down on me like a weight. But when I looked at him again, his expression had shifted. The arrogance was still there, but beneath it I saw something else. Curiosity. Calculation. Maybe even respect. He studied me as though weighing something. "And yet, you still helped me." "Yes." My voice was firmer this time, even though my heart still pounded. "Because I couldn't leave you there. Even if they mocked me, I know what I did was right." The words surprised me, even as they left my lips. But once they were spoken, I stood a little taller. He didn't respond immediately, but his gaze lingered on me with a strange intensity, as if he was seeing me for the first time. Not just a poor girl in rags. Not just someone beneath him, but someone who dared to stand her ground, even when the world tried to crush her. Later that day, the whispers grew louder. Women came to my door, pretending to check on me but really craning their necks to glimpse the man inside. Children pointed, laughing, calling me names too cruel to repeat. I forced myself to ignore them, to keep tending to him. I boiled water, refreshed his bandages, and laid out what little food I had. Each task was small, but it was all I could offer. And all the while he watched. Sometimes with his cold, guarded expression. Sometimes with a flicker of something softer, hidden so quickly I almost doubted I saw it. That evening, when I stepped outside to gather firewood, a group of men blocked my path. "Hey," one of them sneered. "Is your guest enjoying himself?" The others laughed, their voices sharp in the quiet air. My blood boiled, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I lifted the firewood and said, "Believe what you want. I know the truth." Their laughter followed me all the way back to the cottage. But inside, when I shut the door, I caught his eyes again. For once he didn't look at me with disdain. For once his silence felt like approval. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. The storm had not only brought him to me, it had also bound me to him, in ways I could not yet understand. And though the villagers mocked, though my heart burned with humiliation, I stood taller. Because deep inside I knew he had seen my strength. And something in his eyes told me he would never forget it. The storm had passed, but a strange tension lingered in the air, thicker than the mountain fog that curled around our village at dawn. Days had gone by since I dragged that stranger into my home, and though I nursed his wounds as best as I could, one question haunted me every time our eyes met. "Who are you, really?" His hands were too smooth for labor, his clothes, though torn and muddied, were of fine quality I had only seen on television dramas, never in real life. His watch alone could have fed my family for a year, but he wore it like it was nothing. He spoke little, his voice deep and clipped as if each word was measured. A man like him did not belong here. Still I asked nothing, perhaps because I was afraid of the answer. Then one afternoon everything changed. I was outside, hanging damp clothes on the line, when the roar of engines shattered the quiet. My heart lurched as a convoy of sleek black cars rolled into the village, their polished exteriors out of place against our dirt paths and straw roofs. Children ran after them, laughing and pointing. Neighbors poured from their homes, wide-eyed with curiosity. And then I saw them, men in suits stepping out with the kind of urgency that made everyone instinctively step aside. One of them, tall and sharp-eyed, barked orders into a phone before rushing toward my house. I froze, the wet cloth slipping from my hands. A chill ran down my spine. Inside I heard his voice, low, commanding, steady in a way that no villager could ever imitate. When I entered, the suited man had already dropped to his knees, relief flooding his face. "Sir, thank heavens we found you. The entire company has been in chaos. The board was panicking. Your disappearance." He cut him off with a single raised hand. The air in the room shifted, thick with authority. The kind of authority no ordinary man could ever possess. In that moment the truth struck me like lightning. He wasn't just any man. He was someone. Someone powerful, feared, obeyed. My chest tightened as the suited man continued. "The Empire cannot function without you, sir. We must return immediately. The press is already speculating. Your father's rivals." I couldn't breathe. An empire? Rivals? The word spun in my head, unreal and heavy. He looked at me then. Those dark eyes I had grown used to, eyes I thought I understood, now carried a weight I couldn't bear. He was no stranger. He was a king in disguise. A man whose name, I realized with dawning horror, must already be carved into skyscrapers, splashed across newspapers. But instead of kneeling, instead of bowing like everyone else, I forced myself to stand still. My legs trembled, my palms were damp, but I refused to let them see my fear. Because in my home, he had been nothing more than a man who needed help. And in my heart, that's what he still was. I turned back to the basin, dipping a cloth into cool water. My voice was steady when I said, "Your wound still needs cleaning. Sit back down." The assistant blinked, clearly shocked. No one spoke to him that way. No one. But he actually obeyed. Slowly, as if testing me, he lowered himself back onto the cot. His assistant opened his mouth to protest, but one sharp glance silenced him. I pressed the damp cloth to his bandaged arm, refusing to meet his eyes. My heart thundered so hard it hurt, but I would not let him see me break. "Do you realize who this man is?" the assistant hissed, voice trembling with outrage. "He's the CEO of one of the largest corporations in the country. People bow at his feet. You, I don't care. The words left my lips before I could stop them. The room went silent. Slowly I raised my head, meeting their stunned stares. My voice shook, but I pushed through. When I found him, he was bleeding, unconscious, helpless. I didn't care about his name then, and I don't care about it now. Here, he's just a man who needed help. The assistant looked as though I had slapped him. But the CEO, the man I once thought was a stranger, stared at me with something entirely different in his eyes. Something I had never seen before. Respect. A flicker of warmth softened the cold steel of his gaze. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. For the first time since I had met him, he looked human. Later, when the assistant stepped outside to take another urgent call, I finally whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" He studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Because I wanted to see how you'd treat me. Without the name. Without the power." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "And now you know." He leaned forward slightly, his voice low, almost reverent. "Yes. Now I know." And in that silence something shifted between us. The invisible line that separated our worlds blurred, if only for a heartbeat. But even as warmth flickered in his eyes, I knew reality would come crashing back soon. He belonged to a world of glass towers and flashing cameras. I belonged to a world of muddy paths and whispered gossip. And no matter what had sparked between us in that small cottage, I feared it would burn out the moment he stepped back into his empire. Yet a dangerous thought refused to leave me. What if he didn't want it to? The night after his identity was revealed, I could not sleep. The air inside my cottage felt different. Charged, restless, alive with questions I had no answers to. Every creak of the wooden walls, every distant cry of an owl seemed to press on my chest like a weight I could not lift. I lay awake on my straw mat, staring at the dim glow of the dying embers in the hearth, and thought about him. The man who had bled in my arms. The man I had spoon-fed broth like a child. The man who had looked at me with quiet astonishment when I said I didn't care who he was. And now he was no longer just a stranger. He was a CEO. A man who commanded legions of employees, who controlled empires of glass and steel, who probably had the world at his feet. So why was he still here, lying just a few feet away, beneath my humble patched quilt? I turned slightly and my breath caught. Even in sleep he looked restless. His brows furrowed as if battling unseen storms, his lips pressed into a thin line. I wondered what dreams haunted a man like him. A question bloomed in my heart, fragile and terrifying. Could it be that he was torn between two worlds just as I was? The next morning the village was abuzz. Word had spread like wildfire. The stranger I had rescued was no ordinary man but a CEO. Some whispered it in awe, others in scorn. Women clicked their tongues and muttered that I must have known, that I had lured him deliberately. By midday I could no longer walk through the market without feeling their eyes burning into my back. My cheeks flamed, but I kept my chin high. When I returned, he was standing outside my cottage, his assistant hovering nearby with a tablet full of flashing updates and urgent reports. "You must return immediately, sir," the assistant insisted. "The board is in crisis. The shareholders demand answers. The press has caught wind of your disappearance. This could tank our stocks if you don't act fast." I waited, expecting him to leave. After all, his empire was calling. But to my shock, he turned toward me instead. His eyes softened. "I'm not leaving. Not yet." The assistant nearly choked. "Sir, that's reckless." "Reckless," he said, his voice low and commanding. "What's reckless is abandoning the one person who saw me as a man, not a machine." I froze, my heart hammering. Was he talking about me? The assistant sputtered, clearly on the verge of panic, but the CEO silenced him with a sharp glance. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, as if searching for an anchor in a storm. "Do you know what it's like," he asked quietly, "to be surrounded by people who only see your power, your wealth, your name, but never you?" I swallowed hard, unable to speak. That night in the rain, he continued, his gaze unwavering. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask my name. You didn't demand anything in return. You saw me bleeding and you pulled me from the mud. No one has done that for me in years. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him I had only done what anyone should have. But deep down I knew that wasn't true. In this world, most people would have looked the other way. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time in a long time. I don't want to go back. I gasped, my heart stumbling over itself. You can't say that, I whispered, shaking my head. You don't belong here. Your world, it needs you. People depend on you. You can't just walk away. His jaw clenched and for a moment, the powerful soul resurfaced. I've given my world everything. My youth, my freedom, my soul. And what has it given me back? Loneliness. Emptiness. Betrayal. His eyes burned with a fierce kind of pain, the kind no money could erase. But you've given me something I thought I lost forever. Warmth. Humanity. A reason to breathe. Tears pricked my eyes before I could stop them. But the village around us wasn't so easily swayed. Murmurs rose from the crowd that had gathered nearby. She's bewitching him. A poor girl like her has no place by his side. She's dreaming above her station. The words cut deep, but I stood tall. And then in front of them all, he did something that silenced every whisper. He took my hand. Gasps erupted from the crowd. My breath caught as his fingers tightened around mine, warm and firm, as if anchoring me to him. He turned to his assistant, his voice steady and final. Inform the board. I'll return on my terms, not theirs. The assistant looked as though the ground had vanished beneath his feet, but he dared not argue. And then he turned back to me, his voice dropping low enough that only I could hear. Tell me to stay, and I will. The world seemed to pause. The wind stilled, the gossiping villagers faded into a blur, and all I could see was him, this man who had everything, offering me a choice I never thought I'd have. My heart warred with itself. I wanted to tell him yes, to keep him here, to hold on to the impossible dream that a CEO could fall in love with a poor village girl. But I also wanted to free him, to send him back to the empire where he belonged, because what future could I truly give him? A thatched roof, muddy roads, endless gossip? And yet, his eyes begged me to believe. My lips trembled as I whispered, why me? Out of everyone in your world, why choose me? His grip tightened and for the first time his voice cracked with raw truth. Because you're the only one who sees my heart. My chest ached as tears spilled down my cheeks. I had never felt both so terrified and so alive. In that moment I realized something. Whether he stayed or left, whether the world accepted us or tore us apart, nothing could erase the bond we had forged on that stormy night. Because for once, his choice was not about empires or wealth. It was about love. And for the first time in my life, I dared to hope. The warmth of his hand in mine lingered long after the crowd dispersed. For a fleeting heartbeat it felt as though the world had finally stilled. Just him and me, two souls daring to believe in something impossible. But peace, I should have known, is fragile. The very next morning the storm arrived. It began with black cars. Sleek, expensive, foreign to our muddy little road. They rolled in one after another, scattering chickens and children alike, until they lined up outside my cottage like an invading army. From the largest vehicle emerged a tall woman dressed in ivory silk, her heels sinking into the dirt with disdain. Her lips curled as her gaze swept over the thatched roof, the wooden fence, the ragged laundry swaying in the wind. Is this, she scoffed, where you've been hiding? Behind her, men in dark suits fanned out, their expressions sharp, predatory. I froze by the doorway, clutching my apron, as he stepped out from inside my cottage. His face was calm, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Mother, he said. My heart dropped. Mother. The woman's eyes narrowed at me like daggers. So it's true. You've lost your mind. Her voice sliced through the village square, gathering curious whispers like moths to flame. My son, my heir, reduced to consorting with this? Her gaze raked over me, and I wanted to shrink into the ground. But he stepped forward, placing himself between us. She saved my life. His mother's laugh was sharp, brittle. And now she'll ruin it. Do you know what the papers will say when they find out the great CEO was hiding in a hovel with a peasant girl? You'll drag our name into the mud. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they carried the weight of a world I didn't belong to. I lowered my eyes, heat rising in my chest. Part of me wanted to shout back, to tell her that dignity was not measured in money. But another part of me, smaller, weaker, wondered if she was right. He reached for my hand, but before our fingers touched, his mother snapped, "Get in the car. Now." When he didn't move, her eyes blazed. "Do you think your board will wait forever? Already the vultures circle. Your empire crumbles while you play house. If you care nothing for yourself, at least think of your father's legacy." A silence fell so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. His shoulders stiffened. I knew her words cut deep. He was a man built on duty, bound by chains I could never break. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw hesitation in his eyes. And in that hesitation, fear bloomed inside me. That night, the village buzzed with rumors. Women whispered about the rich lady's arrival. Men shook their heads. Children taunted me in the streets. "Dreaming too high," they sneered. "A girl like her will never be chosen." I returned home to find him pacing the small room, his phone buzzing endlessly with messages. His assistant hovered nearby, murmuring updates about stock prices, hostile investors, scandal brewing. He looked at me then, and for the first time he didn't speak. His silence screamed louder than words. I forced a smile, though my chest was breaking. "You should go." His head jerked up. "What?" "You have responsibilities," I whispered. "Your world needs you." "I'm just a village girl." His face darkened. "Don't say that." "But it's true," I said, tears brimming. "I don't belong in your world. And you don't belong in mine. If you stay, you'll lose everything you've worked for. And if I follow you, I'll be crushed by your world before I even take a step." He grabbed my shoulders, desperation in his voice. "You think I care about any of that?" "Yes," I said softly. "You do. Because you're you. Because that's what makes you who you are." His grip loosened, pain flickering in his eyes. "I don't want to lose you," he confessed. My heart twisted, but I forced the words out. Sometimes, loving someone means letting them go. The next morning he was gone. His convoy had rolled out at dawn, leaving only tire tracks in the mud and silence in the air. I stood by the river, watching the water carry away fallen leaves, and told myself I'd done the right thing, that I'd spared him a choice that would have broken him. But when I pressed a hand to my chest, I felt the hollow ache where his presence had been. The villagers smirked when they saw me alone again. "See? We told you. Men like him don't stay." I bowed my head, letting their words slice me apart, because in some twisted way they were right. Yet late at night, when the moonlight spilled through the cracks of my cottage, I could still feel the echo of his hand on mine. And I wondered if, in his skyscraper world of glass and steel, he felt the emptiness too. Because the truth was, we had been torn apart not by choice, but by circumstance. And deep down I knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of our fight to be together. The skyscrapers stretched into the clouds, but to me they felt like prison walls. I returned to my empire with all the fanfare expected of a man in my position. Flashing cameras greeted me at the airport. Shareholders cheered my survival. The media painted me as a phoenix rising from disaster. But none of it mattered. Because in the quiet moments between the endless handshakes and board meetings, I saw her face. The first night back in my penthouse I couldn't sleep. I lay on silk sheets softer than any cloud, but they felt cold, empty. In the silence, I heard echoes of the rain against the thatched roof of her cottage. I remembered the scratchy wool blanket she tucked around me when I shivered, the scent of herbs she used to treat my wounds, her calloused hands brushing against my skin as though I were fragile. I turned over in frustration, but the emptiness beside me only made it worse. In the darkness, I admitted a truth I hadn't dared to speak aloud. I missed her. Days bled into weeks. My mother paraded heiresses before me like merchandise, each more polished than the last. They smiled with perfect teeth, their perfume choking the air, their voices dripping with rehearsed sweetness. But not one of them could compare to the girl who met me with clear eyes and no fear, who looked at me not as a CEO or a prize, but as a man stranded and broken. I found myself comparing every laugh, every glance to hers, and every time the world came up short. At the office, my temper grew sharper. Contracts blurred before my eyes, numbers meant nothing. My assistant tread carefully, his reports clipped and cautious. One evening he dared to speak. "Sir," he began, hesitant, "ever since you returned, you've changed." I snapped my gaze up, anger flaring. "Changed how?" He swallowed hard. "You used to be decisive, cold. Now it's like you're distracted. Like part of you is elsewhere." The word elsewhere struck a nerve so deep I dismissed him with a glare. But alone in my office, staring out at the glittering skyline, I whispered to the glass, "She's not elsewhere. She's everything." Rumors began to spread. The media speculated about my erratic behavior. Shareholders questioned my focus. Competitors circled like vultures. My mother cornered me one evening, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You see? This is what she's done to you. A girl from nowhere. Ruining everything you've built." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout. "She's not ruining me," I said evenly. "She saved me." "Saved you?" Her laugh was cruel. "She's poisoned you. You've forgotten who you are." Her words echoed long after she left. Forgotten who I am? Or found who I truly was? Because for the first time in years I wasn't chasing numbers or power. I was chasing warmth. Humanity. Her. I tried to drown her memory in work, but it was useless. Every deal I signed, every hand I shook, reminded me of how empty victory felt without her beside me. At night I'd drive, past neon lights in crowded streets, until the city thinned and the stars faintly appeared. Once, without realizing, I found myself on the road leading back toward her village. I stopped. My hands trembled against the wheel. If I kept going, I'd see her again. But what then? Would she look at me with the same steady eyes? Or would she remind me of the choice I'd made to leave? I turned back that night, but the longing only grew stronger. At a gala weeks later, I stood surrounded by wealth and glittering gowns, yet felt utterly alone. Then faintly, I caught the sound of laughter. Not hers, but similar enough to make my heart lurch. My eyes scanned the crowd, desperate, until disappointment crushed me. That was when realization hit me like a tidal wave. I could attend 1,000 galas, sign 1,000,000 contracts, build empires higher than mountains, but without her it would all mean nothing. I began to dream of her. Sometimes she was standing at the riverbank, her skirt whipping in the wind, calling me home. Other times she was walking away, her back fading into the mist no matter how hard I ran. I'd wake up with her name on my lips, my chest heaving, sweat dampening the sheets. No matter what I did, I couldn't let her go. One night, as rain lashed against my office windows, I poured myself a drink. The glass trembled in my hand as memories flooded back. The stormy night, the crash, her silhouette against lightning. That was when I admitted it aloud to the empty room. I love her. The words hung heavy, undeniable, reshaping everything. I loved her, not despite her poverty, not because of her kindness alone, but because she saw me when no one else did. She stripped away the armor I wore, leaving only the man beneath. And for the first time I realized I was willing to fight for her. The next morning I called my assistant. "Clear my schedule," I ordered. He blinked in shock. For how long, sir? As long as it takes, I replied. There was only one place I needed to be. Back where it all began. Because love, I now knew, was not something I could command or control. It was raw, unpredictable, terrifying. And hers was the only love I'd ever need. I never knew silence could hurt more than words. The village square, where I once carried buckets of water and traded herbs, was now filled with whispers that cut deeper than any blade. He only played with her. Did you see the way he left? No goodbye. She thought she could climb the heavens by holding on to a man like him. Their voices followed me like shadows. I kept my chin high, but inside I was unraveling. It had been days since he returned to the city. Not a letter. Not a word. The warmth in his eyes that night he held me close. Was it just my imagination? Every night I replayed his touch, his rare smile, the way his hand lingered on mine as if it meant something. Yet the emptiness now gnawed at me, telling me I had been a fool to dream. One evening, as I was washing clothes by the river, the mocking laughter of two village girls reached me. She's nothing. Just a poor girl who thought she was special. If she was special, he would have taken her with him. I clenched the wet fabric until my knuckles turned white. For the first time I wondered if they were right. Meanwhile, in the glass tower of the city, he sat in his office, staring at the skyline that stretched endlessly. A kingdom he ruled but suddenly felt empty. His assistant placed another document before him. Sir, the merger requires your final approval. But he didn't look down. His gaze was far away, fixed on the memory of a dim cottage lit by a flickering lamp, and a girl with tired hands who had smiled at him as though he were just a man, not a CEO. Sir, the assistant pressed. He signed without seeing the words, his chest tight. No deal, no victory. No empire could drown the hollowness in him. At night, he found himself staring at his phone. Her number glowed on the screen. His finger hovered but never pressed. What right did he have to pull her into his world of knives and shadows? Yet each dawn he regretted his silence more. Back in the village, I fell ill from the weight of sleepless nights and endless labor. My body weakened, my spirit even more so. One evening I collapsed in front of my small hut. Villagers walked past, some pitying, others smirking. But when I opened my eyes again, it was not the villagers' faces I saw. It was his. He was kneeling beside me, his suit ruined by the dust, his cold eyes burning with something I couldn't name. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? His voice trembled with anger, but not at me, at himself. I tried to smile weakly. Why would you care? His jaw tightened. Because I do. The truth spilled out then. His loneliness. His fear of dragging me into his dangerous world. His torment at leaving me behind. And me? My tears flowed freely, not from weakness, but from the unbearable relief of knowing I hadn't imagined it all. The breaking point had come. But instead of breaking us apart, it broke the walls we both had built. He pulled me into his arms as though afraid I would vanish. I can't let go. Not anymore. For the first time I believed him. But just as his arms tightened around me, a shadow fell over us. A villager pointed at the black car parked nearby, a man stepping out with a camera flashing. The city had found its way here, and our fragile world was about to shatter. The flash of the camera was blinding. I flinched, clinging to him as if that could shield me from the intrusion. The peace of our small village, the fragile bubble we had built in stolen moments, burst like glass shattering on stone. Reporters spilled out of the sleek black cars, their umbrellas snapping open against the drizzle. Their voices rose in a frenzy, questions flying like arrows. Mr. Liang, who is this woman? Is she your secret mistress hidden away in the countryside? Have you abandoned your responsibilities for a poor village fling? Each word dripped venom. My body went cold, shame washing over me. In their eyes, I wasn't someone who saved him that stormy night. I wasn't someone who had held his pain in silence. I was a scandal, a stain, a weakness they could exploit. I tried to shrink back, but his hand tightened around mine. For the first time, he didn't retreat behind silence or cold indifference. His eyes, sharp as steel, turned to the crowd. "She is not a fling," he said, his voice low, commanding. "She is the woman who saved my life." The reporters didn't falter. They pressed harder, their cameras flashing, their words crueler. "A poor village girl, sir? Is this charity or obsession? What will your board think of this choice? Will your shareholders approve of a woman like her?" Their sneers burned hotter than fire. I lowered my head, my lips trembling, but his arm came around my shoulders, steady and sure. "Enough," he said sharply. "I don't need the board's approval for who I hold in my arms." The crowd gasped, their pens scribbling furiously. His declaration was bold, reckless, and dangerous. That night, the headlines blazed across every screen in the city. "Cold CEO exposed. Secret affair with poor village girl. Empire in jeopardy. Liang Wei's mysterious romance sparks scandal. Beauty or burden. The girl who could topple a kingdom." I sat alone in my hut, the glow of his phone left behind casting the cruel words across my skin. My hands trembled. His world was collapsing because of me. A knock came at the door. I opened it to find his assistant, grave and exhausted. "Miss," he said softly, "the board is furious. The shareholders are panicking. They want him to cut ties with you immediately. They say you're a liability." My heart sank. A liability? Was that all I was? The assistant's eyes softened with something like pity. "If you care for him, perhaps the kindest thing you can do is walk away before they destroy you both." Hours later he returned, his suit disheveled, his shoulders heavy. Yet when his eyes found me, they softened. "I told them no," he said. Tears stung my eyes. "You shouldn't ruin everything for me." He stepped closer, taking my trembling hands in his. "Do you think I care about their opinions? I've fought enemies, rivals, empires, but I've never fought for something as much as I'll fight for you." I shook my head, torn between love and fear. "They'll never accept me. They'll paint me as a gold digger, a parasite. They'll drag your name through the mud." His lips curved in a cold, determined smile. "Let them try. They underestimate how much power a man has when he's finally found the one thing worth losing everything for." His words stole my breath. But deep down, I knew the storm was only beginning. The following day, the threats escalated. Anonymous letters slipped under my door. "Leave him or regret it." Rocks thrown at my hut in the night. Whispers in the market that I had bewitched him. And in the city, investors withdrew, rivals circled, waiting for his empire to fall. The gap between our worlds had never felt wider. And yet, each night, he came back to me, sitting on the wooden bench outside my hut, shoulders burdened by the empire, but eyes searching only for my face. One evening I whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not strong enough for this." He turned, cupping my cheek in his hand. His voice was low, steady, unshakable. "Then I'll be strong enough for both of us." But just as I began to believe him, just as I let my guard down in his embrace, a black envelope was delivered to my doorstep. Inside was a photo, grainy, cruel, of me dragging his bloodied body into my hut the night of the storm. And beneath it, a note written in bold letters. "We know your secret. Give him up or the truth will bury you both." The black envelope felt heavier than stone in my hands. My fingers trembled as I held the grainy photo closer, my chest tightening. It was me, bent over his broken body that stormy night, blood staining my clothes, fear etched into my face. The note beneath was colder than the rain that had soaked us that night. "Give him up or the truth will bury you both." I sank onto the wooden bench, the words burning into me. Who had taken this picture? Who had followed me into the storm, hiding in the shadows? And why now, when the world was already against us? When he walked in, I couldn't hide the tears that streaked my face. Wordlessly, I handed him the envelope. His jaw clenched as he scanned the photo, his eyes narrowing into steel. "They dare," he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. "Maybe they're right," I whispered, my voice breaking. "If I walk away, maybe they'll stop. Maybe they'll let you keep everything you've worked for." His gaze snapped to mine, burning with fire. "Stop? Do you think vultures stop once they taste blood? No. They'll take everything, whether you're here or not." "But..." "No," he cupped my face firmly, forcing me to look into his eyes. "Listen to me. That night you didn't just save my life. You saved me. You pulled me out of a darkness I thought I'd never escape. And I will never let anyone take that away from me." My tears blurred his face, but his words anchored me. For the first time I saw not just the cold, ruthless CEO the world feared, but a man ready to burn his empire to ashes if it meant keeping me. The next day he summoned the board. The tension in the gleaming conference room was thick enough to choke on. Old men in tailored suits whispered like jackals, eyes flicking to me as though I were poison in their midst. One of them sneered, "Mr. Liang, your association with this girl is reckless. Your empire is already suffering. Investors are losing confidence. If you wish to protect your legacy, you must end this scandal immediately." I wanted to disappear. My nails dug into my palms beneath the table, but before I could speak, he rose to his feet, towering over them. "Scandal?" he echoed, his voice sharp as glass. "Do you call it scandal when a woman risks her life to save mine? Do you call it scandal when she shelters me, heals me, protects me without knowing who I was?" The room fell silent, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "She is not a scandal," he continued, his voice cold and resolute. "She is my strength, my partner, my future wife." Gasps rippled through the room. My heart stopped, my breath caught in my throat. "Wife!" The board erupted into chaos. Shouts of disapproval, fists slamming on the polished table. "You'll destroy us all," one man roared. But he didn't flinch. His gaze swept over them, merciless. "If an empire cannot stand on truth, then it deserves to fall. I will not trade the woman I love for the approval of cowards." The storm broke after that. The media had a frenzy. Rivals sharpened their knives. But alongside the noise came something unexpected: support. Stories spread of how I had carried him through the storm, how a poor girl's courage had saved the mighty CEO. People began to see not a scandal, but a story of devotion that money could never buy. And through it all, he never let go of my hand. Weeks later, we stood on the balcony of his city mansion. The night skyline glittered, but my gaze was fixed on him. "You really meant it?" I whispered. "Wife." He turned to me, his usual coldness softened by something raw, something real. He took my hand, pressing it against his chest. "I've lived my whole life believing power was everything. But the night you pulled me out of that storm, I realized power means nothing if there's no one waiting when you come home. So yes, wife." Tears spilled down my cheeks as he slipped a ring onto my finger, simple yet radiant. "You once told me you weren't strong enough," he murmured. "But you've been stronger than me all along. Strong enough to face ridicule, gossip, threats. Strong enough to stay." I threw my arms around him, my sobs muffled against his chest. "I was only strong because you stood beside me." He kissed the top of my head, holding me as if he'd never let go. And for the first time I truly believed that love could stand against the world. My dear listeners, what do you think? Can true love survive when the world tries to tear it apart? If you believe in love that defies power and pride, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to feel hope tonight. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring you more unforgettable stories like this one.